Welcome to almost said the Shields Report. Welcome to the Jackson Post podcast, Behind the Paywall, or just a local version of Saturday Night Live tonight, since we are on a night early. We're on Saturday night instead of our normal Sunday. It's summertime. Schedules are all out of whack. So we're adjusting on the fly. Brandon, did you survive the 4th of July out there in Medina?
I did. I
last
actually
night?
spent the bulk of 4th of July. Actually, I did 3 or 4 stories yesterday on the 4th of July. That will be in next week's edition. One that's already online about CrossFit doing a special workout. CrossFit Jackson doing a special workout to honor a fallen soldier that's from around here. Did not even know about the guy. Apparently, he died less than 2 years before I moved here. But somehow I've been here 17 years and never heard his story before. So I was glad to do that. Talk to the young man's sister and brother-in-law who had passed. Tim Flanagan is the service member's name. So did that, and then later in the day, Spring Creek has a 4th of July celebration with a small parade and get together with barbecue and stuff, and then they have their own fireworks show. And then went out to the ballpark, watched some Jackson Rockabillies, and they lost 9-4, but there was 30 minutes of fireworks after the game. So,
Hey,
like, half the paper is going to be from that game, it seems like, because I wrote a sports story, a sports column. The fireworks stuff that'll be on the front page are from the ball game. So, but yeah, it was a fun day. If I got to work on that holiday, that's the way to do it.
that is the way to do it. And you got to have baseball on the 4th of July. Like, you have to. So I yesterday attended my first ever Pine Tree 4th of July parade on, are you familiar with the tradition of Pine Tree Street Cove, whatever it is?
I've been told about it, but I've never actually been. Julia Stooksbury, who used to work for the Post, a good friend of the show. Yeah, we've reached that status now where we've got good friends of the shows.
We have friends of the show.
Yeah. She actually covered it for the Post 2 years ago when she was with us. So, yeah, so tell me about that.
It was interesting. I felt like kind of an outsider there. I've never been, don't live on the street, just sort of showed up. I was invited. Like, I didn't just randomly
I was going to say.
Yeah, I was invited. Jordan and I went, and we went with some friends, walked down to sort of the main house where all of the stuff is set up.
Right.
Awesome local officials. Senator Ed Jackson was there. School board member Marcia Moss was there. Former Mayor Jimmy Harris was there. So just a lot of random people. It was good. It was a neat experience. I'd heard about it for a long time, so it was just nice to actually get out and kind of do some stuff in the morning, right, before it gets too hot. I think we got there like 9:00. It was all wrapped up by 10:30. So, but it was nice. It's a nice street. I'm kind of a hidden gem over here in Midtown. Pine Tree is, just
That's
sort of
Midtown?
loops around. Yeah, I think so, right? Like, I feel like anything south of the mall to maybe somewhere like downtown, I would consider Midtown.
Well, I referred to something on Ridgecrest. I've been told Midtown, the northern border of Midtown, is the interstate. So,
Whoa, really? Okay.
Yeah. So
That's pretty far.
there was something going on Ridgecrest that I put in the community calendar, and I said in Midtown Jackson. Now, it was between Highland and the bypass. Like, I wouldn't be putting Liberty in Midtown or the ballpark. But anyways, yeah, I thought that all of that happened like up around the northwest part of the county, northwest part of the city, up in those neighborhoods that are all the time complaining about rezoning.
We don't complain about rezoning in Midtown.
Yeah. You're just like, what?
We just complain about people sleeping at Campbell Lake. I'm going to use that joke as much as I can. This is the third time I've done it, but I'm not going to let it go. I'm sorry. We don't complain about that in Midtown. We complain about that in Atlanta. I don't live in Atlanta. I live in Midtown.
There you go.
That's the difference there. All right. But no, 4th of July was great. Fireworks, I was a little nervous. Like, with the legalization of fireworks, I thought it was just going to be like a free-for-all, and it wasn't. I will say this. I did wake up this morning very early to go pick up my daughter in Brownsville. She was out there last night at the 4th of July thing. And I walked out, and my street was like covered in this like haze of, like, you can tell just like the stale smoke that's just sitting there in that humid air. I don't know, but it was nice. Like, it made the light look really nice coming down, like the sunlight. So
I could see that.
Yeah, it's fine. My cats don't. My outside cats do not like this at all, though. Like,
are they still at your house?
I've got a like a crawl space underneath the bonus room in the back that is
Yeah,
linked to my screen and porch, and somehow they wedge themselves under that,
that's good.
like in that crawl space. So I guess they're fine. I'm just glad I don't have a dog that gets upset. I do feel bad for people with pets on these days, like that get really torn up about this stuff. Like it's tough to handle.
We've got. I'm not going to say how many dogs we've got. We've got too many, and but we've got one particular who does not like storms. Does not. In fact, a couple weeks ago, when a storm was moving through and it was pretty loud and pretty flashy at like 3 o'clock in the morning, like he wasn't jumping in the bed, but he had walked to the side of my bed, put himself in between the nightstand and the bed, and him breathing on my face woke me up. So during these days when we've got fireworks going up, from 8 o'clock to 11 or whatever, we get him out at when it's still light at like 7:30, and then if he doesn't go when we go to bed, we just pray. And so far, God's blessed us. We haven't had any stuff to clean up. We're just like, this guy is getting older though, so
Uh-oh.
we just
Give
pray
them
for a
some of
clean morning.
that canine Xanax or something, don't they? I think they have pills for dogs that get nervous that you
They
can
do.
kind of chill them out a little bit. I had to give one to my cat when I transported her to Pennsylvania to live with Laura on the plane. Yeah, gave her a little pill and she slept the whole time. All good. All right, 4th of July and pet conversation. We cover it all here. Let's get to the rundown. Here are the 5 things that we're going to talk about tonight. City council meeting, finally one that was just normal, but there was a vice mayor elected, so we're going to talk about that briefly.
All right.
What I want to spend a lot of time on is how agendas are formed for all of the meetings, school board, county commission, city council. I skimmed that article. I know there are a lot of similarities between the 3, but there's also like a couple of differences.
Mm-hmm.
But just because of the way the leadership stuff is structured there.
And also, some entities have more committees than the other ones. So yeah, but we'll get into that one when it's time to.
Okay. More development requests on Van Drive or rezoning. The opposite end this time. We talked last week about
McClellan and Windy City.
McClellan and Windy City, yes, Northwest Madison County. Well, now we're on the sort of the other end of that stretch. So I
Just
want to talk
north
about
of
that a little bit.
Midtown.
Just north of Mid. Well, that's right. Yeah, because it's just south of the interstate. JMCSS discussing permitted teachers. And that's something that's just, I want to talk about because that specifically, it doesn't affect me personally, but I am very much near that situation. And then the last thing, there have been a lot of protests really since March by a group of people. And I want to, you did a piece on that. You talked to some people who were protesting. So I kind of want to hear about what they're protesting, why they're protesting, and what they have to say about it, and if this is going to be something that happens for the next 3.5 years. So, all right, let's get to it. First one, city council meeting. Again, like I said, it feels like this is our 3rd city council meeting in like 2 weeks.
It's the 3rd one in 4 weeks. Third one of the month of June. Yeah. No, this one was July 1st. My bad. I'm an idiot.
It barely. Yeah. They snuck in there. So it was pretty tame, yeah? The city council meeting this time? Pretty standard?
Yeah. Well, and the reason why it was tame was something that we'll talk about in a minute, was that would have probably generated a good amount of conversation. Really, if you think about it, 2 things were removed from the agenda, which we will talk about that in a minute. So once those 2 things, it was just going to be with the exception of the election of the vice mayor, a pretty routine meeting. And even with the election of the vice mayor, and it seems like something else garnered discussion. Parks and Rec were honored because apparently July is Parks and Rec month.
Mm-hmm.
And Lane College, their interim president, Donald Comer, he spoke for a couple of minutes because they had requested to shut down a portion of Lane Avenue. I think it was, Lane Avenue, going through campus. They wanted to make that a pedestrian area. So he's like, hey, can we shut this down? So if they shut it down, the city don't have to worry about it anymore. It becomes Lane private property. And so they maintain it and do whatever they want with it. And I assume Lane Avenue will just pick up on the other side of campus and take you on to, I think Whitehall Street is where it comes out.
So did they decide to go ahead and do that, or was that just a request? Okay, that's good. Yeah, I use that road a lot actually to go if I'm going to catch the bus, the Greyhound, and I'm leaving school. I will cut through there. But I always wondered, like, I can't believe this is a through. Like, I always had that thought that this is an interesting place to have through traffic because you've got speed bumps in the middle, you've got kids crossing, going to class, back and forth. Like it's not a great place for a public road, honestly. So
Yeah.
that's a smart move.
And I mean, I don't know what all their plans are for it, but the way they were talking during agenda review, it sounds like their plans are it's going to look similar to what the University of Memphis at Lambeth has done with a couple of streets that it requested like a decade ago to be shut down. It's got those metal permanent things, whatever you call them, that are planted into the asphalt that I imagine somebody would have to run into it a whole lot harder than the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit or whatever it is in that neighborhood to bring it down. We're apparently attacking them and dying now. Cool. Yeah, and so I imagine at least that's what it'll look like at the beginning, and if they want to do more to it, they have that option now.
So before we go any further, I am dying to know who was elected vice mayor. Before we talk about the things that were moved from the agenda,
Mm-hmm.
who was voted as vice mayor of, is it vice mayor of the city council or is it vice mayor of Jackson? And also, what does a vice mayor even do?
I guess it's Vice Mayor Jackson. And they really only have, as far as I know, and if any city councilman or any city official who knows more than me wants to correct me, please feel free to reach out. I know there are people who work at the city who do watch this. Hey, everybody, breaking the fourth wall. But as far as I know, it's just two responsibilities. The first one that typically happens most of the time is they run the agenda review meeting. So when we're in there on Thursday afternoon before the Tuesday city council meeting, they are the ones that are facilitating the discussion, essentially going through the agenda. And if conversation they feel like is getting either going around in circles or getting nowhere, or if they want to hurry up and get out of there and go to their grandkids' game and eat a hot dog, because that has happened in the past. Hey, David Cisco, how you doing? Then that's their prerogative. But most of the time, they let them talk. Then the other responsibility, and I've only seen this happen once in the last 8 years, is if the mayor is, for whatever reason, incapacitated and unable to carry out the duties of mayor, then the vice mayor does step in and do that. The only time I've ever seen that happen. Oh, that's a loud one. There it is.
Boom. I like it. I like the background. It's good.
Okay. The vice mayor essentially carries out those duties, however long that needs to happen. Now, if God forbid the mayor were to no longer be mayor through death or hostile takeover,
January 6th. January 6th.
Now I've got all these mental images in my head.
Well, get ready for a Viking helmets and spear.
Confederate flags.
Yes.
All right. Anyways, if he were no longer to be mayor, then the vice mayor would serve for 60 days, and 60 days later, there would be a special called election to elect a new mayor. So the vice mayor would essentially be the interim mayor.
Okay.
For nearly 9 weeks.
Oh, this is like Game of Thrones. Like if you get a vice mayor, like I don't know, I feel like this has coup written all over it. So who is it? Who's the vice mayor? Who did they vote on? Because I know last year there was like some tension and people's feelings got hurt when they didn't get vice mayor. So who got vice mayor this year?
Yeah, the story actually talked more about the agenda review meeting where vice mayor was discussed. Because if you didn't know about the agenda review meeting, it would have just looked like a standard thing where Marta Wallace was elected as the vice mayor. Miss Wallace was nominated by, I think, Councilman Johnny Dodd. And real quickly, when Mayor Conger asked for any more nominations, Larry Lawrence said, I move that we cease nominations. And that passed, I think, unanimously. And then Miss Wallace was elected vice mayor by a vote of 7-0 with 2 abstaining.
Why would you? I'm well, never mind, because then I'm asking you to like form an opinion or guess the reason somebody's doing something, and that's not productive. I was just in my head like, why would you even abstain for like just vote no? But
well,
whatever. I don't.
Half the time when somebody abstains or somebody's on the record for abstaining in a vote, either they thought that they clicked because when you vote in the city council, they've got these switches up at their seat. And if you're sitting in the room, there's a scoreboard. I call it a scoreboard up on the wall behind them. And there's a green light for a yes vote, a red light for a no vote, and then a white light for abstaining. And the default, I mean, it's a toggle. And you turn it to the left and it's yes, you turn it to the right and it's no. And if you keep it in the center, it's
neutral.
Abstain. Yeah, abstain. So abstain is the default. And so half the time when they're on the record for abstaining, they thought they voted and they didn't, or they did vote, but because they're in a hurry and they want to hurry and get through the meeting, it's like they vote, then they get it back to neutral, and Miss Markeisha Johnson, who is the person counting the votes and stuff, when the votes close after like 3 seconds, she looks at it and she's like, okay, we've got 4 yeses, 4 noes, and 1 abstain. Well, that 1 abstain most of the time did vote or thought they voted and didn't mean to abstain. So for all I know, I mean, the 2 abstinences were Miss Wallace herself and Julie Holt. I mean, I didn't talk to Council Person Holt after the meeting, so I can't speak definitively on why she abstained. So for all I know, she thought she voted and she didn't. Or although she's hardly one that ever does
Yeah,
that.
Julie, if she didn't like it, or like the decision, she would just vote no. I would imagine. Yeah. That's just sort of her personality.
Right.
I will say this about the voting. As someone who's attended a few city council meetings, I wish they would have like a 5-second, like, okay, vote, hold it. And then a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go to the next. Cause it is so fast. Like sometimes you can't even see they'll click the yes and they'll go automatically back. Like, has that ever been discussed amongst council members or people who attend? Like, hey, these votes, I mean, they just happen so quickly that it's hard to tell who voted for what.
There was one meeting last year, I think it was last fall, where, and if they get in a groove of, all right, next time on the agenda, consideration of approving rezoning proposal for this corner lot at the corner of these 2 streets from RF1 to RF2. I don't even know if there's an RF zone. That was just the first letters that came to mind. And they click it. And then this one, motion to consider appointing Gabe Hart to the Jackson City Council Education Commission. Boom, go. They get in a groove of hurry up and vote, particularly after they've had a long discussion. If they've had a long discussion that lasted 45 minutes, then it's like, okay, I got to get to work, or I don't want to sit here anymore because the person next to me keeps burping, whatever, they start to hurry it up. And there was one meeting last fall where Councilman Donnell, he was down for and abstained like 3 times. And after the meeting, I walked up to him. I said, because he had spoken and was asking questions where it looked like he was going to vote no on that issue. So when they voted, he was down as abstain. I said, so I walked up to him. I said, you realize on that vote? I said, how did you vote? He said, no. I said, sir, you were the one who abstained on that one. He said, no, I didn't. I said, I know you didn't, but you clicked it back. And so when Markeisha looked up at it, you were down as abstain. He said, we need to fix the record on that. I said, yeah. But then Markeisha and Kenny Cummings, who is the media rep for the mayor, and possibly the mayor himself, we were kind of sitting there talking and like, yeah, y'all need to, essentially, I told them what you just said, I think I said 3 seconds or 4 seconds or something like that, but 5 seconds would be even better. Have it hold for 5 seconds so that is a whole lot less likely. I don't know if that's been said among them. Nobody's mentioned it, but I think that after a few instances of a situation similar to what I described with Councilman Donnell, I think some have been like, yeah, we need to be more careful with it.
Right. It is. It's so hard to keep up with like who voted what. And I get it if it's unanimous and you're just going through this list of stuff and everybody, unanimous isn't that big of a thing. But of course you never know how a vote's going to go until the vote happens. But when it's like a, split 6-3 or 5-4, people want to know who's voting which way.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard to catch that in real time. So.
Well, and even last week when they passed the budget on the second reading, it was a 6-3 vote to pass it. And after the meeting, I'm walking up to Markeisha. I was like, who are the 3? Because I want to make sure I've got them right. And it took us a couple of minutes because I knew about where they were on the board. But one of them that I thought it was like, no, they would have voted yes based on all the conversation of the previous 5 weeks. And then sure enough, one of them that voted no, we were like, okay, that was kind of unexpected. But, we had to ask all 3 of them, just ensuring, because your name's going in the story of voting no, I want to make sure I got it right. And yeah, they all voted no. So
what needs to happen, they need to give red flags out to media members or whatever. And if it's too quick, just throw a challenge flag out, go to the replay. We got cameras set up in there and then just like slow motion it out. Right.
Can we get an instant replay? Instant replay.
Yes. Yeah. Throw a flag. Throw a challenge flag. Well, so congratulations to Council Person Wallace, Councilwoman Wallace. I don't know I'm just going to Councilwoman Wallace. So that's, is it Council Person or Councilwoman, Councilman? Does
I
it
usually
matter?
go with council person.
Okay.
Uh, for both genders because apparently because ever since I did a story I think on the Jackson State softball team and called them the Lady Green Jays, I had a couple of people from Jackson State be like, yeah, we don't really refer to them as the Lady Green Jays. So I was like, okay, well maybe we just need to refer to our elected officials as council people and commissioners and board members.
I'll be honest. I'll call anybody whatever they want to be called, and I have no problem with it. Sometimes I just want to make, sometimes I just don't know. So I just want to make sure.
Yeah,
I'm going to say councilwoman or councilman until until somebody wants me to say otherwise, I guess.
there you go.
All right. So along with the vice mayor being elected, there was more discussion. Was the discussion for the rezoning, did that happen at this city council meeting as well? The one on the Van Drive?
Didn't even come up because it was literally removed from the agenda late on Monday night.
Okay.
Like, it was removed so late that some of the council members didn't know it had been removed until Mayor Conger said, hey, we're removing this from the agenda at the beginning of the meeting.
All right. Well, where do you want to go from here then? Because we could go into that one and why that was removed and what that was going to be about. Or do you want to talk about how the agendas are set and then discuss that?
How about let's discuss the rezoning, and then that should be an easy transition into the agenda setting.
Okay. So what was the original rezoning request for that? I guess it would be the eastern side of Van Drive, right there at North Highland, where Van Drive.
I think it'd be the north side of Van Drive. Isn't it a pretty horizontal road? Like it's parallel.
It's the north side, but I guess when I said the east side is
on the east
more
end.
like
Yeah,
on the east end. Yeah, east end of it.
Yeah, right across the road from Cracker Barrel. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So there's a family that has owned, I think it's like 7.5 acres right here at the corner for the last 30 years. And they wanted to develop it. They've tried to get it rezoned into commercial, and it gets voted down every time. And this is going back to past councils because I've heard a little bit of the history of it from the property owner. And the last name escapes me. I apologize. But Austin Holman is the developer who did a lot of the talking at the agenda review on Thursday, June 26th, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so their plan is to put, if they were to get it rezoned, part of it would be a commercial development where they would put, he kept saying something nice there. This is the same, well, in their defense, this is the same developers who brought Jonathan's Grill to, that just opened up earlier this year to over there around the ballpark. I hadn't been there yet, but I've heard good things about it.
I've been once. It's good. Yes, it's good. It's cool that Jackson has something.
Yeah. So he's thinking something on that level, maybe even a level up there. I know our buddy Chuck Walker, whenever he mentions it on his radio show, he's thinking putting something like a Sprouts there. I'd never heard of Sprouts until I heard him mention it, but apparently that is like a level or two up from Aldi. Am I right about that?
I thought Sprouts was more of like an organic health, like health conscious type of grocery shopping.
And I've never been in Aldi. I thought that's what Aldi was too. Is it not?
No, Aldi's just like I don't want to say cheap. You look like you're in like East Germany. They just put the boxes of like stuff on the shelf and they just rip it off. And you got to pay like a quarter for your shopping cart and bring your own bags.
So it's Dollar General.
Yeah, I mean, yes, yeah. But look, I'm not nothing against Aldi. I mean, I'm not trying to shame anybody that goes shopping at Aldi. I just don't think Sprouts and Aldi aren't those
okay. I need to go in there and have a better understanding of what Aldi is. My apologies. If anybody with Aldi or is loyal to Aldi is watching or listening, my apologies. I didn't mean that as a disrespect. So Sprouts is like an organic type, health nut type of place. Right.
I think, the reason I know the Sprouts, it's like in where my daughter used to live in Plano. They got one in Germantown. It's in these sort of like, I don't want to say uppity types of suburbs, but
right.
Yeah.
Okay. So our buddy Chuck was hoping Sprouts would go there, but they're wanting something along those lines in there. And the way that I read the plan and the blueprints and stuff, that would be the only commercial part to this. Now they do have there's like a little corner of the property that's, got space to put something small there. And so when the council people are asking, what's this? They said, honestly, we didn't have anything else to put there. if we wanted to maximize that space, thinking putting something there like a human being or something like that there, because if Jackson
Like a
needs
little small
anything,
drive through coffee, right?
right? Because if Jackson needs anything right now, it's another coffee shop.
A coffee shop. Why not? We've only got 232.
So,
All
but
and like 230 of the 232 are all within 1 square mile of each other.
right, but then in between the coffee shop and the something nice would be a townhome development, and I mean the plan that he had for that, it looked to me like something nice. It would be one cove with, I forget the number, but I want to say it was somewhere between 20 and 30 townhomes in it. It would be gated and it would be upscale type townhomes. He said we wouldn't be putting it would be like, it wouldn't be vinyl. It would be have a nicer finish to it because the back of the homes on one side would be bordering the country club, Jackson Country Club. So he said, we're not wanting to create anything that's going to be an eyesore for anybody playing golf. They get mad when they put their seventh ball in the water. They don't want to look over and see vinyl.
They don't want to look over and see a bunch of poor people watching them play golf. I just shanked my 7-iron. Why are these poor people looking at me? Why is there a chain link fence back there? Get out of here.
Yeah. So that's what they're proposing to do. That's what they want to do. That's why they're asking for the rezone. But a lot of people in the neighboring neighborhoods and the country club don't want that. And so there was a planning commission meeting where they were supposed to discuss this, and about 15 citizens from that area showed up. And from my understanding, they loudly let the planning commission members know, we're not in favor of this. We don't support this. We'd really like this to be voted down. That's me putting their message very nicely from what I understand. And so they voted. They didn't reject it, but they didn't pass it either. It just failed. So it didn't get the recommendation to the city council. And so after that vote happened, developers put up a sign in front of the property, like, this is zoned for residential, which, by the way, if you look at a zoning map of Van Drive, I'm 90% sure this is the only land on Van Drive that is not commercial, some type of commercial zoning.
And I don't want to break your train of thought, but I've got like 2 questions that have come up in my head about this.
Go ahead.
Okay, the thought of a commercial property being built there, what just like the alarm that goes off in my head is traffic is already pretty bad at that spot.
Right.
I worked at the country club for a long time, and I can remember trying to turn left out of there to get onto Highland. Sometimes it would take me forever because the traffic would back up, because for some reason on that east end of Van Drive are 2 left. Wait, is it two
no,
left
it's
turn
only
lanes?
one left turn.
One, that's it. It's only 1 left turn lane, 2 right turn lanes.
Right.
So getting out is really difficult to do. And so I can only imagine if there's even more commercial property developed sort of right there. Like, is that the reason that maybe people have been hesitant to rezone it? Is that the reason they're giving, because of just traffic flow at that point? I can imagine traffic being backed up all the way onto Highland again if people are stopping to turn into those things.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a big reason that they're giving for it. Flood control or drainage issues is another issue, because there is a drainage ditch, maybe even a creek back there. And I think that some trees have already been cut down on that development. And so I've had some people connected to the country club reach out to me, and they've said, yeah, when you take the trees out and you take out those root systems, or the root systems are dead and they'll eventually decay and weaken that soil structure, then we're going to have an erosion problem there. So which would cause flooding. And the country club is concerned about that because I don't know how much money they spent, but I'm sure they spent probably well into the 7 figures to renovate that golf course this year. And that renovation is still ongoing. So it's logical for them to be worried about flooding and that type of stuff on that end of the course. So those are the 2 main things. I think they are worried about the sign that they put up after the planning commission saying, hey, yeah, we're going to put duplexes here, because these gentlemen are business people and they want to get the largest ROI on this investment. So if they've got to keep it residential, they're going to put as many residences as they can there. And so they're thinking 40 duplexes, which would house 80 families. It's a pretty simple comparison for me. If you keep up with this stuff as much as I do, a little over a year ago, Cleland and Pleasant Plains, that lot there at the corner of that road, they wanted to put a nice commercial, almost a multiple commercial things there on one parking lot. I don't want to say a strip mall, but something like that. They wanted to put a bank and maybe a coffee shop, number 233, and a donut shop or whatever. And they were like, no, it needs to stay how it is. Well, if it stays how it is, residential, the people who said, okay, if this gets voted down, then we've got one option to put a trailer park there. And it's not anything I'd go to print with yet, but I'm hearing a lot of rumors that is in the works to put a trailer park there a year later. So,
I mean, in the end, right? Like in the end, the people who want to develop a property own the property. And so what they're doing is they're requesting, hey, here's what we want to do. We think this is like a good compromise. And then if the neighborhood, which I understand, look, we went through this last week. I completely understand the people who live around that area not wanting things disturbed. I get it. But the developer's like, okay, well, you don't want that, then we're just going to do like you said, we're going to maximize our return on investment, and it's not going to be something that you're going to like as much as whatever our plan A was. So
right.
you choose, I guess, right? Like you pick what you want.
Right. Now, I will say, getting back, you brought up a good point that I wanted to put there. Stan Pilot, who is the city planner for Jackson, when he was speaking to the council during agenda review, one of the council members asked him about the red light. And he said, we've done multiple studies on that intersection, and that intersection is just under the amount of traffic that it needs to put a traffic light there. So obviously, putting a development there, we kind of put it over the top, and the
Wait,
and the
what intersection would that be?
Van Drive and Country Club Lane.
They're thinking about putting a traffic signal there
Mm-hmm.
too. Wow. So you would have one there, and then just a few hundred yards up, the one on Highland, right?
Yeah,
Wow.
quarter of a mile
Okay.
away.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you
Interesting.
think about,
Van Drive probably needs a traffic light somewhere, because you're right. And we know that tragedy that happened several years ago on that street as well.
where the couple was killed when people were drag racing, they were leaving the theater, I think, or something.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but not only that, I mean, I was telling somebody that had reached out to me that I know lives out there, but there have been some times where some subscribers who live in that neighborhood miss their paper. And so I'm taking them paper, and I'm taking it, when I got a window of 45 minutes or whatever between assignments, I'm taking it out there, if it's Tuesday morning about 11 o'clock and I'm in that neighborhood and I got to be somewhere, I'm not going out on the Van Drive from there unless I'm turning right. But if I got to get to Highland, I am actually going to go the other way. Now, there may be a shortcut that I don't know about because I don't know that area too well. But what I do know is I'm taking Plantation all the way back to Chickering.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's Chickering.
And I'm winding back to Highland that way if I don't just go to the bypass and go south from there to get to downtown or wherever it is I'm going, just because that intersection is so busy and I don't feel like waiting to turn left to get on the Highland.
It's a mess, man.
Yeah.
Van Drive is like the yin and yang of like the things that probably help Jackson a lot. Obviously, tax revenue from Van Drive. I can't imagine we get more sales tax revenue from any other area. We might, but I don't know. That's probably got to be in the top five. But then also just the traffic on there is horrendous. And people complain about it all the time. I'm not going to complain anymore. I mean, everybody knows. Everybody knows what it's like over there. It's bad. Really bad. So you mentioned the agenda. So this was on the agenda, then it was taken off late Monday night. Okay, so if it failed in the planning commission, how did it get put on the agenda? And maybe that's the natural segue into this next conversation, how these agendas get set. So
all right. So essentially, a lot of the agendas for all three city and city council is what we've been discussing. So we'll talk about them first. Scott Conger is the main one who determines what's on the agenda for any given city council meeting. Now, most of the time, a lot of those items are going to come from committee meetings, whether it's Board of Zoning Appeals, Planning Commission, Budget Committee, Parks and Rec Board. I think there may be a Parks and Rec Committee too. A lot of them come from this. And now I had to ask him about this because this one failed in the Planning Commission. Like I said, it didn't get rejected. It didn't get approved. It just failed. I said, how did it even get on the agenda in the first place? He said, well, when something comes to the Planning Commission, it doesn't require being approved to get on the agenda. It's already on the agenda at that point. I said, well, then what are they gathering to vote for? He said, they are voting to simply say, we recommend this or this is approved. And when they are voting on that, they're not supposed to be voting on what they think about it. There's a set of criteria for each kind of zoning category. And so they take the area, where it is, what the developer wants to do. I'm sure at some level factors into to the vote too, but sometimes they don't know because plans can always change. So essentially, the vote is just simply to send this to the city council with or without a recommendation. So if it gets that recommendation, it's like getting the blue check mark on Twitter before Elon bought it. You're just verified at that point, a little more legitimate.
So, okay. So once that all right, let me see if I can ask this in a way that makes sense to even myself asking it. If somebody wants to put something on the agenda, then like, how does it even go in front of the planning commission to begin with? Do they set a meeting with the planning committee, or do they like go to the mayor first and say, hey, we want this on the agenda? So it gets on the agenda. Then they've got to go to the planning committee for the planning committee to say, yeah, we recommend this, or no, we don't, or we approve, whatever it is.
Essentially, it's got to make its way to Stan Pilot, the city planner, because is he on the planning commission? I'm not sure if he's on it. The mayor's on the planning commission. I don't think Stan may be on the planning commission. I haven't been to planning commission meeting, so I apologize. But whether or not he's on it, it's still got to go to him because he's the city planner. And some people go straight to him. Some people talk to Conger. I think a lot of them, like if I own property in District 1 and I want to develop it, but it's not zoned for that development, then I want to talk to the city councilman, who is JP Stovall. And then JP will talk to Stan and they'll set up they'll put that on the agenda for the appropriate planning commission meeting, which meets every month. And then once that happens, then it's on its way to the city council.
The county commission is similar to that, correct? Most of those things happen through committees. That's how stuff.
But the way that I understand it with the county commission is if it doesn't get approved by the committee, which planning commission may be different, but I know like budget stuff, a budget committee, if the budget committee doesn't approve it and recommend it, it doesn't go to the full commission.
Really?
Or at least it's not on the agenda. Now, if a commissioner still supports it, there's a couple of places in every meeting that they can stand up and say, hey, we need to discuss this. This needs to be voted on, blah, blah, blah. Typically, it's at that very last thing before they adjourn where the chairman, Mike Taylor, says, all right, any and all matters not discussed in this meeting that need to be discussed, essentially speak now or forever hold your peace. And so that's usually a good time for stuff like that to be brought up. But yeah, committees are a little more effective, play a larger role in that issue from the county's perspective. But other than committees, it's just pretty much getting a hold of Mike Taylor, the chairman of the county commission, saying, hey, can y'all discuss and possibly even vote on this? Now, if me as a citizen, let's say I lived in Madison County and I knew that Mike Taylor is the chair and I felt like I could go to him with this, well, he'd probably say, well, has this, if it's a zoning issue, has this been brought before the planning commission? And if it hasn't, he'd probably say, well, get on their agenda or something like that. And I might even call, there are 10 districts in the county and 25 commissioners. So whether I have 2 or I have 3 commissioners, I'll call at least one, if not all of them, and say, hey, can we discuss this issue, or can y'all discuss this issue? And they'll probably also say, if there's a committee for it to go through and it's not time sensitive, because sometimes that plays into it too, then they'll go through that and it'll eventually get put on. But Chairman Taylor does have that freedom to say, hey, we really need to discuss whatever. So I'm gonna put this on the agenda. And I actually gave 2 fairly recent examples of that in the story. One being he felt like we don't need to meet every month. So how about we cancel a couple and just remove them from the schedule altogether? Then if we need to meet that month for whatever reason, we can do a special called meeting. He wanted to remove February and November. They don't meet in July because they traditionally have always met twice in June to pass the budget. Come to find out, the county budget doesn't need 2 readings. So he said, we're going to cancel the second June meeting and we're going to officially cancel February and November because he says, for whatever reason, both of those meetings each year get lowest attendance out of the whole year. And there's scheduling reasons for there not to be a lot on those agendas. They typically don't have a lot going on those months. I mean, the November one, it's the Monday before Thanksgiving most of the time. February, the only thing I can come up with is that it's the week of President's Day. Is President's Day always celebrated on a Monday? So maybe they have to back it up to Tuesday. Maybe some commissioners forget that it's on Tuesday and they just don't go. So that's why for the low attendance. And they wound up, I think they canceled February, but they kept November on the schedule. And they only had the one June meeting. They're not meeting this month. So they got a little bit of a compromise. And then the other thing he brought up was putting a water pipe from JEA starting on the western end of town, putting it all the way to Huntersville to kind of have water infrastructure already out there so that they can start developing that for Blue Oval City. Yeah.
So it's essentially as an like need by need based. Like if something comes up, he's like, "Hey, we need to put this on there to discuss it or vote on it or whatever."
Mm-hmm.
Now you wrote this because was there, I don't know, whispers of like people in the public didn't like were confused on what got on an agenda or what got removed or put on and what that process was like. I just remember seeing a few comments on social media where people some, I don't want to say conspiracy theories.
Oh no, they totally were leaning into conspiracy theories.
Yes. So you just wanted to clear that up. Like this is how these agendas are actually set. There's not some nefarious, thing happening.
Well, even last week with the rezoning at the corner of Windy City and McClellan, that got removed from the agenda on Wednesday, the June 25th, the day before agenda review. Well, a lot of the people, I put that on the Post site and other media outlets did that too. But on all of them, people are like, well, they may say it's off the agenda, but they're still probably going to discuss it Tuesday at City Council. Well, if they did that, that would be illegal. So I'm pretty sure Mayor Conger and all 9 council members don't want to go to jail. I don't think they go to jail for that, but it still is illegal.
I don't know. I don't know what's legal and what's not anymore. I feel like if you're in charge, you can kind of do whatever you want to do.
Well, let me just put it this way: if they did that, they would have to face the wrath of a strongly worded column in the Jackson Post
and a couple op-eds.
You don't want to feel that wrath.
You do not. You don't want to feel that wrath. I do think like it is important though, because I didn't even, I didn't think about it. It never crossed my mind like, oh, why are these things on this agenda that we vote, that is voted on every month or is discussed every month at whatever meeting. It just never crossed my mind to the origins of those items, right? They're just there. And so we talk about them and then they're voted on. So this was good to sort of just like pull that curtain back and say, hey, here's the process of it all. And of course, like you said, it is a little bit, I don't say different, but I would assume, and you know what they say about assuming, I would have assumed that if something got voted down by a commissioner, not necessarily voted down, but not recommended, that it just wouldn't make it. But it makes sense what Mayor Conger said. It's not like their job isn't to say what they think it should or shouldn't be. It's just essentially whether they recommend it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's already going to be, because they shouldn't have any pull in the vote itself. The vote itself is going to determine whether something is rezoned.
And I hadn't thought about that, but that's probably why their vote doesn't necessarily remove it from the agenda. But I mean, nobody on the planning commission, well, I guess technically Mayor Conger, but nobody else on the planning commission is an elected official. It's all citizens who have raised their hand and said, hey, I'm willing to serve on a committee. And the city council approves their nomination from Mayor Conger to be on the, whatever committee it is they're on. So yeah, now the county commission committees, for the most part, they're all made of county commissioners. Actually, this week's paper or next week's paper is going to have a story about in city and county unelected people who are on both budget committees and kind of the purpose that they serve. So, but with the exception of that, most of the important committees that are actually voting about what to be recommended before the council or before the commission, they're all actual elected county commissioners.
All right. Well, that is in the weeds. We are, that's what we do on the show. We get deep in the weeds of local government.
I've never been golfing, but I imagine I would get in the weeds if I went golfing too.
You shank that 7-iron, you'd be in the backyard of a duplex.
I was going to say, I might be on Van Drive.
You were at another local governing body meeting of some sort with the school system where they discussed permitted teachers, right? And I need some clarification on that. So what was the topic of discussion for that particular article that you wrote? Was it about how do we attract more teachers who are fully licensed and permitted? Is that what that conversation was?
They're not necessarily trying to attract them. They want to get certified. They want certified teachers. But I don't know, Gabe, if you're aware of this or not, but apparently there's a teacher shortage at the macro level. I
Yeah,
don't know why that would be, because this
we get paid.
nation,
Yeah.
the youth of this nation is just full of perfect little angels playing their harps on the way to school every day. Anyways, I was about to turn into
Well,
old man.
no, let me just say this. I think the problem with the teacher shortage isn't kids. I will say that. I would say that the reason there's a teacher shortage now is the demands of the job or the weight of the bureaucratic BS that's above classroom teachers is so heavy that the amount of money they are paid to try to work under that weight isn't.
I can see that.
That would that
Also, parents are jerks too.
yes.
I
Well,
mean, not all
yeah,
parents, but
not all parents.
I imagine if
Yeah.
you get a class full of 25 kids, it's 50 parents. Some of them may live in the same household, but a lot of them don't. So that's probably about 40 households you've got to deal with. There's probably going to be some jerks in there.
There are. When I was in the classroom, though, there were times that I did not enjoy my job, and I will say that 9 out of those 10 times was about what was the expectations of what I was supposed to do from people above me.
Yeah.
That was the who hadn't been, by the way, who hadn't been in the classroom in 20 years. So that was my frustration. 1 out of 10 times was I had a hellion of a kid in the class and he was disrupting everybody, or she, whatever. And so yeah, usually it's what's coming from above
Mm-hmm.
on our backs. So what was the conversation about? They're like, we want these teachers to get certified because there are a lot of teachers who are on waivers here because the state loosened that up a few
Yep.
years ago when there was a shortage. And they were like, hey, we need some warm bodies in these classrooms. So come on.
And that was the foundation of the conversation, is those I guess laxed restrictions on non-certified teachers. And so they were discussing, I think this was the budget committee who met were discussing this, and they were discussing, okay, how do we pay them? Because certified teachers are now getting paid 52 a year, base pay of 52 a year.
Right.
Yeah, for the first year, and then second year it bumps up to 54,000. So they were like, do we put them on the same scale and the same schedule as a certified teacher, or do we, certified and not certified? Maybe there should be a pay difference there. Well, how much do we knock it down, and how do we handle that pay schedule? Because according to Dr. Marlon King, the superintendent, which by the way, he is sitting in on committee meetings now.
That's good.
Yeah, he hadn't done that much the last couple of years, but as they're starting a new fiscal year, he's essentially, apparently he's clearing his schedule on the fourth Tuesday of every month so he can be a part of the committee meetings now. The committees aren't meeting every month just to meet. If they've got nothing to discuss, they don't meet. And so, if technology committee is good for 3 months and they're not going to meet for 3 months, but when they do meet in that month 4, Dr. King's going to be there to be a part of the discussion. So, but, he talked about, there are a lot of the teachers that are not certified in JMCSS. They're great teachers. They do a good job of getting the most out of their students and making sure that, from August to December or January to May, that those students are getting a quality education and are noticeably more knowledgeable at the end of the semester than they were at the beginning about, whatever subject they're teaching. But he even said, like, some of our students are not good at taking tests. They struggle with that. We've got some teachers who struggle at taking tests too. And that's the only reason they're not certified. So do we force them to be certified? Well, they strongly urge them to, and they like for them to be. I've had multiple board members tell me we want every teacher at all 26 of our schools to be certified. And, it's not a horrible goal for your school system. But if you've got somebody who's been doing the job for a few years and has proven, hey, yeah, I can do this, just because they can't pass a test, I would hope that wouldn't disqualify them. So they're going to give them chances, and they're going to let them keep their job, actually give them a raise. And then once they do get certified, this isn't set in stone yet. They're going to vote on it next week at the school board meeting. But I think that they're going to recommend, like, if I come in to and teach writing at JCM and I'm not certified, but I get certified in year 3, then in year 3, I will go from the permitted pay scale to year 3 of being certified pay schedule, because that's where I would have been had I been certified in year 1.
You know what's interesting about that? And we could have a whole conversation on education and how whack some of it is. But I know there's a teacher shortage. I think we're also running into a point where the admin pool is a little shallow. And that's just natural progression. If you have a teacher shortage, you're eventually going to have an admin shortage. But the thing about that is they would never allow an admin to be an admin on a waiver, right? You've got to pass the test. You've got to get the specific license. And I've always argued that if you are because in any other professional setting, you can work your way up, right? Like you can sort of like work your way up the ranks of management. Education, that's not the case. You could be the best teacher and understand the way a school runs like 3 different ways. But if you don't have that certification or that admin license, you can't be an admin. That is a little frustrating. The flip side of that, though, if you want to fix education, I think, and I think, I think this is a pipe dream. I don't think this is reality. I had a conversation with a guy who opened and ran a very successful charter school in Memphis for several years. Talked to him last year. We both agreed. You want to fix public education, you hire the smartest people to teach and you pay them a lot of money, period. I think that's how you fix it. And I also think I kind of think it's important to pass the test. I do. Especially if you're teaching a content area on the secondary level. If you're teaching secondary English or secondary math, you better know that content enough to pass a test to teach it, because that stuff is complex now. The way our standards are written right now for high school in English and math, it's stuff I did in college at this point. Like a lot of it is. So you've got to really be able to understand what you're teaching to teach it. And then that's not even including not just know your content, but then how do you apply that knowledge to a classroom of 25 kids and 24 of them probably could care less about algebra. I could have cared less about algebra when I was in high school. So you're teaching students who are probably reluctant to be there in the first place. So man, I understand why the state gave a lot of those waivers, because they just needed people to teach. But at the same time, it is not, people have an antiquated view of what teaching is now, which 30 years ago, maybe it was well, if I can't do this, I can just go teach. I don't know that that's the case anymore. It's gotten really complex.
Yeah. Ever since they went to was it Common Core math? Was that what it was called?
Yeah, that got a lot of the attention. Man, it's been a 2-decade descent into just a lot of confusion. And I think we got a lot to clean up. And I say that I'm not saying anything bad about on the macro level of public education. We've just got a lot to clean up.
So when you say 2 decades, I don't want to get into the politics of it or anything like that, but I mean, did this start with No Child Left Behind, or was it even before? Okay.
Yeah, that was sort of the seed that was planted. But everybody wants to point at that. But then I will say this, and of course I love Barack Obama. He's a political hero of mine, but his administration and Arnie Duncan, his education secretary, they really, I think, did more, maybe not more to harm public education than that No Child Left Behind, but they definitely, with the Race to the Top money, made the testing process, the rigor of the standards for the states. Tennessee was one. They got a lot of that money.
Mm-hmm.
They made them, I feel like it makes teaching a lot more challenging, and it makes learning a lot less fun. Let's just put it that way. Both sides of the political aisle have to take some blame for this, for where we are right now.
Yeah,
in my opinion. Yeah, but going back to them, I do like the idea of, one, Dr. King has been very, very, very focused on pay, and he's done more than any other superintendent I've ever worked for to get teacher salaries up to where they are, and I appreciate that. I think it's awesome. I think when I first started teaching, it was 30-something thousand.
Good grief.
Was year one. So big round of applause for 52. But yeah, man, it'd be great if certified teachers maybe got a little bit extra, because that is important. I think it's important to be, and I think data bears that out. You have certified teachers in schools. Generally, those school scores are a little bit high. So, all right, last thing, and then we'll make it quick. There have been a lot of protests in downtown Jackson, I think since March, by groups who are sort of like, I know there was the No Kings, the nationwide No Kings protest, but then there have been other ones as well. And you did a story on a group, I think it was Indivisible Jackson, who was out protesting like a Thursday afternoon
Yeah.
in downtown. So one, why were they out on a Thursday instead of like a typical weekend? And two, what were they protesting? And do they have plans to be out here long term consistently protesting?
So this was on June 26th because I went and talked to them at 4 o'clock, and then I headed over to City Hall for agenda review about an hour later. But they were in front of MD Anderson Park, which is right between the James Todd Federal Court building and essentially the office building for everybody who works in the federal courthouse. And it's right across Highland from the Madison County Courthouse. So they're standing on Highland protesting it, and each protest that they do, I mean, they protested. At times it's been at least every other week on Saturday, and there's always been like something specific that they're protesting. This specific protest was against ICE operations and deportations, and it wasn't. I mean, they don't like the deportation and stuff. It was more about the lack of due process for a lot of the deportations. And Cindy Boyles, who is the coordinator of Indivisible Jackson, she was the one who talked to us. And, she said the Constitution in the 5th and 14th Amendments guarantees due process. And I even asked her during the interview, I said, now, is that for everybody inside the country, or is that just for actual citizens? She said, oh, it's everybody. She said, Brandon, it's only one paragraph. It'll take you like 14 seconds to read it. And sure enough, I looked it up and quoted it in the story that the way the 14th Amendment is worded, one of the paragraphs, yeah, you don't have to be a actual citizen of the country to get due process if you're in whatever legal system. And for the purposes of this protest, we're talking immigration, you are guaranteed the right of due process. And she said there's a lot of people not getting them. The National Indivisible organization had posters produced, and there were a few of those that were at the Jackson protest. And it was the national organization who said we're going to protest on Thursday. It wasn't Cindy saying, hey, let's all meet on Thursday. The national organization. And I don't remember there being a reason. I mean, it's June 26, 6/26. Maybe there was some kind of important discussion going on Capitol Hill that day or something. Whatever the reason was, it wasn't obvious. Go ahead.
Well, I was wondering if it wasn't the hearing for, I forgot his name, Garcia. He was the one who was taken out of the country, brought back, ended up in Nashville on a smuggling charge. You remember hearing about that? So I know he was in court last week, so I don't know if it might have been surrounding that. Albrego Garcia.
It could have been
was
that.
his name. Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. I spend so much of my time when I'm working concentrating on what's going on in Jackson and Madison County.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, shoot, this afternoon after I got done cutting grass, I was like, all right, so what happened in Texas with the flooding? So I'm catching up on that tragedy. So yeah, and when I'm covering these protests and it's about national issues, I'm usually having to ask Cindy, okay, so what exactly is happening?
Yeah.
And
Cindy's great. I've met her a couple times. She's very smart, extremely intelligent. And, I appreciate what they're doing. It's interesting because the last protest we talked about on here was before the city council meeting or the work session when AFP, right?
Yeah.
It's a completely different side of the political aisle, but they were out there. They don't want new taxes. So obviously protesting is a very healthy, I think, part of, our
the
culture,
political process,
the fabric of our country. Yes. Like we can do that freely. So
right.
I'm all for both sides being able to do that. Did she say that is this going to go on? Like, I'm struggling to find like vocabulary words tonight, maybe because it's late. Is this going to go on indefinitely or did she say?
Honestly, I didn't ask. I guess I just kind of assumed it is. It will because, they've been protesting for they're now on June. They're now in their 5th month of doing regular protests. Why would they stop now? And particularly, I was talking with one of my more liberal friends just earlier today, and they were talking about it's not necessarily who is in the White House now, but it's what they're doing that is causing so much angst among the people who don't agree with what he's doing. So, and I imagine that level of angst is the reason for all these protests at the national and the local levels. I mean, Indivisible Jackson, they did protest during Trump's first administration because we covered a few of those, but it wasn't this many and it wasn't this often and there wasn't this many people involved. There were about 30 people at this protest on a Thursday afternoon, which was more visible because there's more people downtown on Thursday from 4 to 6 p.m. riding down Highland Avenue than there typically is per capita Saturday afternoon between 12 and 2. But I don't know. My assumption, and I could be wrong, and if Cindy or somebody with Indivisible Jackson is watching and I've got this wrong, I apologize, Dr. Boyles, but my assumption is they're kind of following the lead of the national organization. So if the national organization says, hey, we're going to protest on July 5th, we're going to protest having a UFC fight on the White House lawn, then they'll do that.
I thought that was an Onion article. I swear I did. When I first saw it, I was like, oh, that's pretty funny. But wait, no, for real.
Wait,
Dang,
he really said that.
It's really going to happen. All right. Just do it. Look, just do a WWE event out there. I want Cult of Personality to bam pop on and CM Punk to come out.
Can't you just see CM Punk sitting crisscross applesauce in the Rose Garden and just
I think the Rose Garden got.
Yeah, the Rose Garden did get pulled up.
It got paved over. It's just asphalt now.
All right,
but that's where the ring's going to be.
So CM Punk doing a pipe bomb. He's like, I know y'all don't like pipe bombs at the White House, but I'm about to drop one, and then
he might bring a real one there. I don't think he's for that administrator. Like, I think he may go the other way on politically.
Yeah, that would be my assumption too.
Yeah. Well, anyway, good. Like I said, now honestly, I had thought about going out to the No Kings, but the reason I didn't is, and this isn't necessarily an opinion, maybe it is. I think for protests, if they're done well and they're done right, they're not snarky. They're not, I didn't like a lot of the signage I saw, I think. Does that make sense? Like, I don't want running.
But you drove by it, right?
I drove by it, but I also saw just on social media some of the signs. I just think you start to wander in an area of being unproductive at that point, because you're not going to change anybody's mind by being a jerk or saying some smart aleck, phrase on a sign. I think everybody on the outside who is concerned, I think there are very just legitimate things that you can just lay out and say and stand up for this. So, again, like I said, both sides, I love the fact that both sides are able to protest and voice their opinions. I just didn't care for some of the signage.
It makes sense. The only thing that I have a problem with is, and I get that some people just don't care and maybe they feel like it's a way to make a point to be noticeable like this, but can we not put F-bombs or S-bombs on our signs when we got kids riding by?
Yeah. I just, again, I think that can be, because what's the point? Like, the point of a protest, obviously you want to draw attention, but you also, I think, want to maybe not change other people's mind, but at least open up an avenue for conversation, because maybe then through conversation you can change somebody's mind, or at least get them to see something in a different way. But people are just going to throw walls up if they feel like. And look, I've attacked people verbally more times than I should, and I think I've just learned it just doesn't help anything.
Yeah. Well, and the whole thing about the language and expletives and stuff. I mean, I've seen flags when Biden was president. There were flags. There was a whole chant that included my name.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's like, you're not accomplishing anything other than just feeling like you're cool and you're hip and you're edgy.
Right.
And really all you're doing is you're showing you have no other alternative because you know no other way than to do this. And it's nowhere near as effective as you think it is.
Because I know how I feel whenever I saw those people saying that. I know automatically what I thought about them. And so I think I just didn't want the flip side of that, to where if I'm holding a sign that has some smart aleck comment on it, automatically somebody from the other side is going to see it and it's going to completely shut them down to even wanting to have any kind of a conversation.
Right.
Anyway, but hey, keep protesting, because I do think it's good, honestly.
Yeah. Right.
I really do.
We've got that right. Make your voice heard. And most of the time, if I can, I'll be out there and ask you about it.
Right. All right, buddy. We went through it. We got through all 5.
Yay.
Saturday Night Live. We don't have a musical guest on our show tonight. Thankfully, probably.
My wife says I'm not a good singer, or else I could do like Justin Timberlake and do both.
There you go. Now, that's Justin Timberlake's episodes. Those are some of the better ones in SNL, I think. He could bring it.
He's good at not breaking character, unlike Jimmy
Yeah.
Fallon.
He gets Jimmy Fallon to break.
Yeah.
The Bee Gees. That was the best. All right, man. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday night and enjoy Sunday. And talk to you next week.
All right. See y'all.